Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Planning Applications Committee meeting of Thursday the 15th of November. It's going 10:30. Lucy, can you confirm Sederunt and apologies, please?
Good morning, everyone. We have 15 members present. We are quorate. And so far, I have received apologies from Councillor Giusti. Councillor Campbell and Councillor Hagman are not present, but may be along later in the meeting. That's noted now. Thank you.
Thanks, members. Declarations of interest? David and then Jim McComb.
Thank you, Chair. You're aware of my presumption that wind farm developers take a lot more than they give, so I will absent myself from items 5 and 7. 7 being probably the last. That'll be the last you see of me. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim McComb.
Thank you, Chair. I'm seeking advice with regard to item 5. I did not attend the October meeting, and I want to know whether I am eligible to participate in item 5.
Okay, we'll confirm that when we come to it. I would say no, but what we'll do is when we come to agenda item 4, Lucy will confirm who's able to participate, and we'll do the same for item 5 before we proceed to the debate. Any other declarations of interest or inquiries? Okay, thanks, members. Agenda item 3, minute of previous meeting of 18th of October. Is that a true record? Happy with that? There is one matter arising from the minute. Although it doesn't affect the accuracy of the minute, we're going to have an additional agenda item at the end of the meeting. It's a good news story. It's about educational contributions, but it's something we have to deal with to ensure that we don't have a problem with the accuracy minutes as we move forward. But we'll deal with that as an agenda item number 8. Okay, thanks, members. We now move on to agenda item number 4, which is an application for the erection of a garage, workshop and MOT station, class 5 at plot at Castle Hill, Whithorn. The application type is applying permission in principle. The reference number is 18/0406/PIP. The recommendation is to refuse, and the case officer is Iona Brooke. Can you, Lucy, confirm who is able to participate in the decision making in this agenda item, please?
The members who are eligible to participate in item 4, which is the plot at Castle Hill, Whithorn, are as follows: Councillor Dempster, Councillor John Campbell, Councillor Blake, Councillor Ian Crothers, Councillor Fairbairn, Councillor Ferguson, Councillor Giusti, Councillor Hagman, Councillor Hislop, Councillor Lever, Councillor Maitland, Councillor McComb, Councillor McKee, Councillor Murray, Councillor Tate and Councillor Young.
Thank you, Lucy. And we are in session, but just as a reminder, Iona, can you take us through the presentation again and any additional information you have that members might have asked for at the previous meeting, please? Archie?
Chair, normally we go through the process at the clerk normally reads the process of how we're doing each before we actually go into the item agendas.
Ask me this again.
The clerk normally goes through the process.
Sorry, we thought that might not be necessary given that there were no registered speakers for today, but I'll ask Lucy to do that. I'm sorry about that. Lucy, can you go through the process, please?
I'll just read the first paragraph of the process, which is relevant, but again, we agreed that we wouldn't read the whole thing today. The planning applications will consider each application in turn as detailed on the agenda. The case officer or other appointed officer will make a short presentation addressing the determining issues accompanied by digital images. Any late information, amendments or corrections will be reported at this time. Members may ask questions of officers following the presentation on points of clarification. Normally the chairman would be provided with a list of eligible representatives, but there are no representatives on the list today. The Planning Application Committee will now proceed to determine the application or, where appropriate, agree a recommendation to be made to full council who will determine the application.
Thank you, Lucy. Thanks, Archie. Okay, Iona, can you just take us through the presentation again and then update members on the additional information required, please?
Thank you, Chair. The application seeks planning permission in principle for the erection of a motor vehicle workshop to be utilised as an MOT station at Castle Hill, Whithorn. The application was brought before yourselves on the 20th of September of this year, where members deferred consideration for the application to allow for future clarification in respect of the availability and effectiveness of allocated business and industrial sites within the town. The application site is just at the east of the town here and forms part of a larger site allocated for housing. An indicative, as it's planning permission in principle for the erection of a workshop, an indicative layout has been submitted which details an L-shaped footprint incorporating a workshop, MOT bay, office and staff facilities serviced by a centrally positioned new road access taken from the public road and with associated parking. Just now it is an agricultural field. The application site, as I said, does form part of a larger site allocated for housing, and at a more specific level, policy ED1 supports the principle of business and development in such district centres as Whithorn within established business and industrial site, which this is not part of. In regards to consultations, the Council Roads officers had no objections to the application, but the Council Environmental Health Officer did object, stating that the proposal may give rise to noise complaints from residents of the existing dwelling houses in the vicinity. So this is Castle Hill with the application site just to the right. This is taken further back from closer to Whithorn Town Centre with the site just there to the right. This is a view with the site on the left looking back towards Whithorn, and another view of the site itself. Again, this is a view just of the access road looking back towards Whithorn. Oh, sorry. And that's one of Ketburn Place, which is an adjacent small building group there. This site shows just the local development inset map for Whithorn, and this is the site here, which you can see is allocated for housing, with the purple site at the very north allocated for business industrial use. It was considered when the application was heard before you in September, and is still considered, that the development would represent a conflict with policies OP1, H1 and ED1 in terms of principle of development, site selection and potential land use conflict. The need has not been demonstrated for the proposed general industrial use within part of an allocated housing site, nor it has been demonstrated that the proposed development would result in a land use conflict with adjacent residential dwellings. The proposal is therefore still contrary to numerous policies. Mr Sutty is now going to update you on points of clarification that have been made since the last meeting. Thank you.
David, you want to continue, please?
Thanks, Chair. It's really just to update members as to two further representations which have been received, which you may or may not have received individually. There was the first one is certainly on the Council's website, and that came from Bridge and Company, which are the agents for the applicant, expressing concern about the revised report and particularly to do with the identified B&I site, WTH B&I1, raising issues over whether or not the land was available and whether or not the landowner that we have details for was the full owner of the site, and basically going on about the financial reasons why they were looking at as well, considering that the B&I site is not economically viable or available in any sensible time frame. There's a second email which I think members may have received just yesterday as well, from an objector to the application, expressing the concern about the proposal and how it would affect the residential amenity and public safety in the area. So I'm assuming that members have seen that, because that came in to all of you last night. Just really following up from what Iona has just said, the key issue with this application is really looking at what is before you, which is the application for the general industrial use on the housing site. There are perhaps issues that have been raised in terms of the long-term effectiveness of the BNI site. That's something which the local development plan team will have to take forward for the next local development plan. As far as we're concerned, currently it is identified. It's also in the proposed LDP2, and we have emails from the landowner saying that it is something that the land is available for that purpose. The issue that has been raised about the southern part of that site and whether or not that is in the same ownership, obviously that's something we'll have to pursue separately, but to a degree that is a secondary element. The key issue is really the application that's before you today, is it appropriate to put a general industrial use within an allocated housing site surrounded by a number of houses and a nearby school and recreational facilities. And really that is all that members are being asked to consider today. We fully appreciate the applicant obviously wishes to promote this, and we've no reason to doubt that he wants to actually pursue this. But in sheer planning terms, the land that gets planning permission is freestanding. The permission goes with the land, not with the applicant. So if permission is granted for an industrial use on this land, then it would be quite legitimate for that then to be marketed for anybody to take up that use. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, David. Members, we're in session. If I've got Councillor Carruthers and Councillor McComb.
I suppose mine was just to maybe come back after hearing Councillor McComb. I think as a local member, but one point when I didn't was watching there was just the level of on-site parking. And I just wondered, is that an appropriate level? What formula have they used in regards to that? I'm not being overly specific, but I just want the reassurance that the amount of off-road parking is adequate for the potential business use that's there, if it was said to be agreed, or approved, I should say.
Okay, David.
Could you maybe take it back to the site plan? It is worth noting it's a planning permission in principle, so that layout is purely indicative. They would have to come forward with a further application if this is approved. But I remember rightly, roads have not objected, subject to conditions. So obviously from their aspects, they're satisfied.
Councillor McComb.
Thank you, Chair. Could we go back to the LDP map, please? Now, at the previous meeting, it was indicated that there may be a viable alternative industrial site in Whithorn, namely BNI 1. If you look at BNI 1, the southern part of that site is immediately adjacent to housing. It is sandwiched between two areas which are already allocated in the plan for housing. So how viable that would be is a matter of question. The northern part of the site, yes, would be a viable industrial site, but it would require about 150 metres of roadway to be put in to access that site. Again, how viable that would be for a small development such as an MOT station is questionable. The ownership of the industrial site has been thrown into question. I understand the southern part of the site, next to the houses, is under different ownership, and the owner of that land would be reluctant to sell. So, how effective BNI 1 is as an alternative site is questionable.
I take it that's an observation you're making.
That is indeed an observation, yes.
Because as the planning officer told us, the application site is what we're considering. It's no our problem or our issue to find alternative sites, and there is an assurance that, given the issues that have been raised about the proposed industrial site. That's something that we looked at in the LDP2. That doesn't take away. But David, can you respond to Councillor McComb, please?
Really, it's just, reiterating what the Chair was saying, that if you look at the reason for refusal, it doesn't actually state that the development should instead go to a BNI site. It doesn't say that. It's solely looking at the issues of the proposal on an allocated housing site. The potential for other sites hasn't really been fully exhausted. You'll note in 1.5 there was even a third party came forward and said, I've got a site which is possible. We've not looked into that because what we're looking at is it appropriate to put a workshop like this on an allocated housing site? The case we don't feel has been made. The only real justification being put forward is it's obviously going to be financially more viable for the applicant to take this site because of the land ownership issues. But I'm afraid that's not a material planning consideration as to whether it's an appropriate site.
Councillor Carruthers.
Thanks, Chair. These points of clarity are very helpful, I should say, probably before I go into my kind of preamble. But I mean, that's the principles, I think, how I've kind of analysed this. So we've got a site, we've got a business that's wanting to grow and expand in that area, obviously, for its own reasons. That has wider implications in regards to the local economy, hopefully positive, you'd think. So you've got to look at, if we were to approve this, you've got to look at the reasons why. So why would we make an exception to policy and allow an industrial site placed on what is being identified as a residential site as already been outlined? So policy ED1 has been referred to already. I think that's important if we were to go forward and propose something, or maybe look to agree. But I think, going back to the comments I made about the site layout, it isn't in principle. So again, I would have maybe some concerns in regards to, if we were to agree this and approve it, if it was in principle, if it wasn't to come back to the committee for the committee to have the final approval, because I think off-street parking would be important if it's in close proximity to residential houses in that area, which obviously it is. The size and scale of the building, the infrastructure leading up to that would be important as well. But I think the effectiveness of the other site, which is fundamental to the report, I think there's a lot of doubt in regards to its effectiveness because of the infrastructure costs it would cost for a business like this. So if we're looking at this business coming forward, I think the infrastructure cost to bring that site up to being a level of where it's effective, so you could go and construct an industrial unit of this size and scale on it, the business case just wouldn't stack up, I don't think. So I think there is reasonable grounds to approve it if we wished, and it would be, in my view, it would be, we'd make an exception because of ED1 and the benefits this business would have in the local area in particular, but it's contained within ED1 itself. When you look, the detail is in the local development plan under that policy. There would be others as well, but I think the effectiveness of WTH.B and I1, I think it's to be exact, is definitely in question when it comes to, it may well be there, it may be seen as effective in a large scale development, but on a scale of development this size, I don't think it's effective at all for the information that we've got. So I'm quite open-minded in regards to this, Chairman, but quite good for the committee to hear other views, not just mine.
There is one point I'd make, Councillor Carruthers. You said the availability of the other site is fundamental to this report. What the officers are telling you is it's not relevant to this report. This is an application for a specific site that's allocated in the LDP for housing. So it's no fundamental. It may be something you want to take into account, but it's no fundamental to the report because it's not part of the report. It was something that was raised at the last meeting that we have subsequently sought to explore further. Councillor Ferguson.
Thanks. I normally agree with you, Chair, but on this occasion, in actual fact, it could be viewed as a reason for moving against the LDP as an exception, because there's nothing else there that's usable for this applicant. The question I'm really going to ask is that it's really quite worrying for me, and I'm kind of, David can guide me here. The LDP, surely the landowners are consulted before there is an allocation or a proposal goes forward that is for housing, building, or whatever it might be. And now we've got this other information. Will we be letting the reporter know that there's a conflict here between two landowners in the one area that we're saying is for business use? No to do with this, but I'm wondering then what legitimacy does that then have when the current LDP, if the process hasn't been followed absolutely to the letter of the law earlier?
Well, I'll let David answer that, but remember as well, he said he's an email from another landowner saying, I've got land available. So there are other opportunities that we maybe want to explore as a council about land availability. But that's not for today. What you've been asked for today is to agree a plan application for industrial units in an allocated housing site. And I presume that housing site, the owner has agreed it should be for housing. But David, can you respond to Councillor Ferguson?
I probably don't want to get too deep into LDP stuff for our Planning Applications Committee, but I can certainly assure members that the whole LDP 1 process, the adopted one, was gone through. In terms of LDP 2, we again wrote out to all the parties to make sure that they were still willing to have those. You'll note that there was an update in the report in respect of at 1.2 about the applicant's representation, which hadn't been picked up on, but that's been forwarded, so that aspect will be considered. So again, in the event that this application were refused, then that opportunity is still open for the LDP to examine whether or not to identify part of this site for industrial purposes. As far as the other site goes, really what you're looking at, we did write to the owner that we perceived and understood to be the owner of the BNI site, and they confirmed that it was still available. That's included in the report. If questions have arisen of that going forward, that site won't be looked at for LDP2 because there weren't any representations which were unresolved to it. But for LDP3, it does raise issues about whether or not that is an ongoing viable site that we should be including.
Councillor Maitland. Oh, I should have said it. I hear a phone ping, and can we make sure our phones are either in silent or switched off, please? Councillor Maitland.
Thank you, Chairman. I understand that members are very sympathetic towards the growth of business, and I fully understand that. But we're in a regulatory framework here. We have agreed an LDP, we've agreed our policies, and I have read this report very carefully. And if you take a decision based on the information that is in this report and based on our policies, Chairman, I think it is quite clear that you can't come to any other conclusion other than the fact that there has not been demonstrated that there is an absolutely overwhelming need to place an industrial process on housing land allocated for housing. So I propose we go with the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Maitland. Any other members? Councillor Young.
I'd be happy to second that proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Hislop.
Chair, Councillor McComb made an observation at the start with regard to the fact that there is no land use conflict between having a housing site slap bang next to a business industrial site. Why does it appear in the recommendations that there is a land use conflict, or could be, when we've actually agreed that map up there, which shows that they're, I can't see the number, the wee bit at the side bounds onto the business site, and the other one's slightly across the road, and I think it's a similar situation with the proposed housing site. Why is one deemed acceptable and one deemed possibly not acceptable, just within the recommendation?
I think we'll no need to stray too far from the report, but thank you, Heath Hall. Okay, David, do you want to respond to Councillor Hislop?
Yeah, all I can say is that has been through the whole LDP process. It's got full council approval. Rightly or wrongly, that is what we've identified. As I say, going forward, whether we wish to put that into LDP 3 is a valid point. Whether or not you'd wish to have, say, the southern half of that site restrained to limited to Class 4 business use, which is not the same as a Class 5 general industrial use, I would suggest that probably would be a sensible way to go forward for that. But obviously that's not for the committee today.
Okay, we have a proposal and a seconder. Members happy to go with that? Councillor Carruthers, then Councillor McComb.
Thanks. I think, again, there's a fair argument either way, and a lot of sense being talked, especially common sense in regards to how it looks like in a black and white view. I think if you look at the papers and the report, but I do think, is there an exception in regards to this particular case that's come forward? I have got some questions over the layout, its potential design and layout, I think, siting and design, but I think they could be probably addressed through the fullness of a full application or the detail coming back to this committee, depending on what would actually agree. So I think I would move that we would approve it as an exception to policy, using ED1 in particular as the reasons why. That, I mean, I often refer, as maybe members have heard in the past, building the local economy is our number one priority, but certainly it's not a planning policy, but it is our number one policy across the council. As a small business here look to grow and expand in the area, it'll deliver a service that's required. But I think there's two reasons. It's ED1, it's contained within there the economic justification, but actually the effectiveness of this particular site, I think, has been drawn into question in regards to a business of this size and scale, and its readiness. It's not of a point of readiness. If there was half a dozen of these units looking to be, say there was 6 people looking to buy, then it probably would be a point of readiness. It's a larger scale business, identified business site allocation within the local development plan. It doesn't suit this type of business, and this service is obviously required in the area. So hopefully there's enough being picked up there, Chair, that I would move as an exception to policy.
Councillor McComb.
Thanks, Chair. I would be prepared to second that amendment on the basis that this is an application in principle and that the objections which have been stated can be contained by condition, that there is the potential for mitigation in terms of screening, noise suppression, etc.
And I take it these would be conditions that would be attached at the time the formal application would be submitted, because it's only an in-principle approach at present.
Chair, no, it's actually the case that if you are approving planning permission in principle, you have to attach any onerous conditions at that stage, because effectively what is then submitted in what's called the submission of matters reserved by condition is that it's just putting the meat on the bones of the conditions that you've set out. If members are minded to approve, I'd thought about this already, roads conditions were recommended by the roads officer. There's mention as well in paragraph 415 about the need for a European protected species survey, because there was some doubt raised at the last meeting about that as well. Landscaping was mentioned by Councillor McComb. I think that's quite appropriate. Because you would be accepting the existence of a general industrial use within a general housing area, then I don't think you could reasonably attach a condition about the noise levels or things like that. That would be a matter for environmental health to pursue when and if there was found to be a breach of their particular legislation. But I think it probably would be reasonable, as you did last month with the car wash in Gretna, to have an hours of operation condition on it.
And do we set that now, David?
Sorry, Chair?
Do we set the operating hours now?
Yes, it would probably be useful to have some direction that way.
Councillor Carruthers.
Thank you. I mean, I think that's very helpful again. Certainly, I'm very much supportive of what Councillor McComb was saying in regards to screening, possibly even planting. Even if there was noise mitigation, could be, if that's too onerous a condition, then fair enough. But I wondered if there was if it maybe not competent, Chairman, but I would like to actually send it back to this committee so we see it, including the off-street parking. I don't know if that's something we could apply. I think it used to be, we've got an indicative layout, so therefore, I mean, confident we can leave it with our planners to determine and subject to the condition that was said. But I mean, I think if this is going to a vote, it shows that it's on balance, clearly, if it was to be approved. So therefore, if it's approved, I think it's only right this committee should actually itself determine the final outcome, if that's possible, if it's competent.
That'll be fine, but we still haven't set operating hours. Councillor McComb.
Thanks, Chair. I would be inclined to go with the hours of 7 a.m. and 9 p.m.
7 days a week?
No, weekdays and half day on a Saturday. no operation on Sunday.
7 till 9 Monday to Friday, 7 till noon on Saturday, no operation of any kind on a Sunday. The rest of the conditions, do you have them, Lucy? And then you can read us the motion and the amendment, please.
Okay, will I just clear up what the conditions are first?
Well, before we do that, is it reasonable to say to an MOT station when most of the heavy-duty vehicles were working all week that they can't work on a Sunday? Because whatever we do has to be reasonable. Councillor Haslop?
Chair, my understanding it's not an HGV MOT, that's a different class. This is up to light goods vehicle, 3.5
Well,
ton
even
or
light
less.
goods, they might work on all week and we need to be repaired on Sunday. But anyway, if that's the condition, that as long as it's reasonable and as long as we get advice from officers that that's a reasonable condition to put, we'll then get Lucy to sort out what the conditions are and read us the proposals. Lucy?
Would you like me to just read the vote first? Or what the motion and the...
Sort out what the motion amendment is and then we'll go straight to the vote.
Okay. We've had a motion proposed by Councillor Maitland and seconded by Councillor Young to go with the recommendations as per the report, which is a planning application permission in principle, and the recommendation is to refuse. And we've had an amendment from Councillor Crothers and seconded by Councillor McComb to approve the application as an exception to policy ED1 with the in principle reason of economic justification. And however, there would be some conditions attached to this was to be approved. And these are as follows: landscaping such as screening to take place, roads conditions, need for the protected species survey, and the operating hours would be restricted Monday to Friday, the hours of 7 a.m. till 9 p.m. and on a Saturday from 7 a.m. to 12 noon, and there would be no operation on a Sunday.
David, is that right?
That's what I've got, Chair, yes.
Okay, then go motion and amendment, Lucy, please. Ian?
I think there was maybe one small thing. Maybe it's out of kilter, but I think the effectiveness of the current allocated site and its current status is the only thing I added, and I did say some more around about that. I mean, even if it could be worded in that way, but I think that's important. Certainly, to my view, its current status doesn't actually suit a business of this size and scale at this moment in time because the infrastructure is not in place.
You realise when you do that, you'll open the floodgates for every time we decide something will be the effectiveness of other sites that we brought into the equation as well. Councillor Maitland?
It's really a point of process, Chairman. Is it really competent to take a motion with an economic justification for going against policy, exception of policy, without a shred of evidence to support that particular amendment? I mean, not a shred. I have absolutely no information here were I to feel sympathetic about the whole issue and to say, right, I would withdraw my motion in order to support the amendment. There is nothing here, not a single thing, to explain why the members might go against our own policies, which have been through the process with the public. Is it competent?
Lucy?
My advice would be that if members don't feel there is enough information for you today, then perhaps you could consider deferring it to another meeting, and for that meeting.
I think that it has been deferred already, and we could introduce another argument next month. I think the question was quite simply, is an economic advantage appropriate to place on a motion or an amendment when there is no evidence to say there will be an economic advantage? That's the question. Jim McComb?
Thanks, Chair. It was stated at the September meeting that the applicant is currently operating from premises in the vicinity of the application site. However, these premises are rather less than adequate, and it was also stated the likelihood was that if the application was to be successful, he would take on additional employees. Surely, to my mind, that is an economic justification.
Normally, though, that would be followed by a business case, because he could tell you next month he meant to do that, but didn't he? And as David said earlier, he has no reason to doubt the applicant, and that's not the question about whether the applicant's been doubted or no. It's not the question about whether or no there would be an advantage. That the question is there any evidence presented to members to support it? Councillor Crothers.
Well, I suppose going back to the question that Councillor Maitland has asked, and I think it's probably for the chair to decide more than the governance officer, is whether it's competent or not. But I believe that with evidence, going back to what Councillor McCombs said, that the evidence was presented as in a verbal format. We can evaluate ourselves with our own skills and experience in regards to whether a business will grow or not. That level of investment, any business that starts up intends to grow. It's a first rule of your business case, your business plan as he projects you. You didn't look at starting at £50,000 a year turnover and reducing that to 10 grand as you go forward. You look to grow and expand. Your business case always gets larger. I think it's straightforward. We may well, but the competency question, I think maybe is a fair question, but I'm quite clear in regards to the effectiveness of the site that is available within in regards to my motion. But I think there's 2 points there, very strong points, and that's how I've came to my conclusion. It's on balance, let me tell you as well, looking at policies as we do. I think the policies, I think it's a good local development plan that we have, but the policies are there, they're quite fair. But in this case, this is about helping stimulate the local economy. In particular, I don't think there's an effective site at a point of readiness at this moment in time, and this business is looking to grow. We've had that as a verbal update.
Right, go to the vote, Lucy.
Councillor Dempster.
Motion.
Councillor Campbell.
Motion.
Councillor Blake.
Motion.
Councillor Crothers.
Amendment.
Councillor Fairbairn.
Amendment.
Councillor Ferguson.
Amendment.
Councillor Hislop. Councillor Lever.
Motion.
Councillor Maitland.
Motion.
Councillor McComb.
Amendment.
Councillor McKee.
Motion.
Councillor Murray.
Motion.
Councillor Tate. Councillor Young.
Motion.
And I can confirm that the motion carries by 9 votes to 5, and therefore the application is refused as per recommendation in the report.
Thank you, Lucy. We come to agenda item number 5. Again, there was a remit to officers from the last meeting. So can you confirm, please, Lucy, which members of the Planning Applications Committee are able to participate in the decision making in this particular agenda item, please?
Members who can participate in item 5 are as follows: Councillor Dempster, Councillor Campbell, Councillor Blake, Councillor Dougie Campbell, Councillor Drybra, Councillor Ferguson, Councillor Hislop, Councillor Lever, Councillor Maitland, Councillor Martin, Councillor McKee, Councillor Murray, Councillor Tate and Councillor Young.
Thank you, Lucy. Again, Chris, we're in session, members. Can you take us through your presentation and then provide us with any of the additional information that members sought or current officers' advice on where we are? Just when you're ready, Chris, please.
Thanks very much, Chair. As we've noted, this application was deferred from October's meeting to allow for discussions between the applicant and the planning service. Just to summarise this, this item is, or this application is made under Section 42 of the Planning Act, which is determination of applications to develop land without compliance with conditions previously attached. And if approved, it would result in the grant of a new freestanding permission. The gist of the conversation we had with the applicant, the update rather, is in paragraphs 1.2 to 1.5 on pages 29 and 30 of your committee papers. As you might recall from last month, we had verbally updated members on the applicant's wish to alter the recommendation. It's in section 1.2, and just very briefly, it does ask us that we reconsider the recommendation in the report and recommend a decision to allow either the approval of the application in respect of condition 1 only, or to determine that condition 1 should be removed and a new permission issued accordingly. We did go back to the applicant after the last meeting, and they did eventually come back to us, again disagreeing with the way that we had viewed this application, and did ask us, and just in summary, paragraph 1.3, if I quote from that, the view of the applicant remains that Section 42 application should be considered as submitted and decided after considering each proposed variation. So we have taken this application and just brought it back in the form that it was here last month, with a recommendation to refuse. But we'll go through the slides again just before we have a bit more of a discussion on the conditions. This never works for me. There we go. Just to look at the site, it's located in the west of the region.
Chris, can you give us a minute, please? David McKee, did you want to speak now?
If you didn't mind, Chair, it's just that there's so many alterations that they are wanting to the permission given by the government officer, DPEA. Should we be discussing this at all? Is it in our remit to change their decisions, given that we refused permission originally? No disrespect to the planner, I'm sorry to interrupt you. But
this is an application to vary what they've already been given approval for, therefore it comes to us. What they've been given approval for, they could implement tomorrow.
yes,
but it's already in place.
But he's wanting to do things at variance with conditions 1, 10, 26, 27, 28, 29 or 30 of planning permission granted under the terms of DPA appeal reference. Should we be discussing that? Should that not go back to the reporter who made that decision?
David Sutty will help you.
In a word, yes. Basically, under Section 42 of the Planning Act, the application comes to the Planning Authority in the first instance. If members are minded to go with the recommendation of refusal, then they have a right of appeal to the Scottish Ministers. But as the Chair correctly said, that permission that was granted on appeal before is freestanding. They can implement that at any time.
Andy Ferguson.
Just for clarity, and it's
Mind you, we better see Chris's slides first because we're in discussion
well,
now.
It's on that very thing so that we didn't lose sight of it, because my understanding is, and I'm just asking David to keep me right here, is we could agree or disagree on any of the conditions, and we could agree some of the conditions, and that doesn't mean we then throw the whole thing out. We just don't allow that one condition. Is that right or is that wrong? And that's
we'll have that in debate. Let's, Chris, get by with the slides first so we know what we're looking at, and then we'll get into session.
Just before I go on, Councillor Ferguson, there is a bit of a discussion about the approach that we've taken with this application kind of later on in my presentation. So if we'll cover that, no problem. So as you can see, the site is located in the west of the region on the coast. It's 8 kilometres north of Port Patrick and 8 kilometres west of Stranraer. Come on. It's with me. There we go. So the site covers 558 hectares and encompasses both Larbrax and Galdenoch Moors, within the application site in red there, and it's located entirely within the Rins Coast regional scenic areas. The background to the application is contained within paragraph 1.7 on page 31. And as we've already heard, the original planning permission was refused in 2015 by the Planning Applications Committee and subsequently appealed to the Scottish ministers, who allowed the appeal in October 2016. So the application, just before I move on to some of the other slides, the application seeks to amend, replace and introduce new conditions of the extant permission that was granted by the reporter. In terms of amended conditions, the applicant is looking to amend conditions 1 and conditions 10. Condition 1 relates to time to implement the development, and they are seeking an increase from 3 years to 5 years. And condition 10 governs the tip height of the turbines, and they are seeking an increase to 110 metres from the approved 100. In terms of replacement conditions, the applicant is seeking to replace conditions 26, 27, 28, 29 and 30, which cover noise, with a new condition 26, which, in the interests of keeping things brief, is in Appendix 1 of the report, pages 55 to 62 of your committee papers. And the applicant is also proposing 2 further new conditions. Condition 27, which relates to shadow flicker, and condition 28, which seeks the removal of 5 smaller wind turbines located within the application site and nearby to where the larger turbines are proposed. So there's a before and after of the turbines. The proposed 110 metre tip height is the one on the right hand side, and there we have a further turbine elevation over there. The ZTV submitted by the applicant shows that most of the visibility to this one is out at sea or within 5 kilometres locally of the application site, and with further visibility on the east side of Loch Ryan, approximately 10 to 15 kilometres away from the application site. This is cumulative development of turbines over 50 metres in height, so you can see the operational North Rins wind farm located to the southeast of the application site. And there we go. This is all cumulative development from our own wind turbine database, so you can see there are a smattering of smaller wind turbines located throughout the Rins there. We'll just very quickly run through some of the viewpoints. We looked at these last time, so these first few are in close proximity to the application site. And all these viewpoints represent the 110 metre turbines rather than the 100 metre ones, which currently have planning permission from the monument. And that's the view from the ferry. Let's go back to that one just now. The council's landscape architect has objected to the proposal, specifically in relation to condition 10. Her response is summarised paragraph 2.8 on pages 36 and 37 of your papers. And just to summarise her point, she states that the proposed development would introduce incongruous and intrusive large-scale wind farm development on a stretch of the regionally important and RSA designated North Rins coastline. Turning to the specifics of the application, as we know, the use of planning conditions is governed by Circular 4/1998, and there we have the 6 tests of conditions in front of us. Oh, there we go. So condition 1, the applicant is seeking to alter the time for implementation. Given changes to current sort of practice and legislation, we no longer add time conditions specifically to applications in this manner. So in this instance, we consider condition 1 to be unnecessary and superfluous to the determination of this application, and it could be discarded from any decision notice that we issue. Condition 10. As outlined in the LVIA in the committee report, and that's paragraphs 4.18 to 4.35, we do consider that the proposal for the turbines at 110 metres to be contrary to LDP policies IN1, IN2, NE2, NE9 and OP1C plus the associated supplementary guidance. So in terms of the circular, we consider that this condition is neither necessary nor reasonable. I'm going to skip over condition 26 for the time being and go to condition 27, which relates to shadow flicker. This is a development management consideration contained within policy IN2 when we look at wind farm development. And we do consider this one to be necessary and relevant and something that may have been or should have been considered by the reporter at the time. The new condition 28, this one relates to noise. Now, the information submitted by the applicant. Oh, sorry. Yes, so the noise, the support and noise information that came with the application said that the 5 smaller wind turbines in the vicinity of the proposal at Larbrax had not been included in their cumulative noise assessment. The condition leads us on to condition 26 as well, which is the one that they were looking to add to do with noise. Because the 5 turbines hadn't been included in the cumulative noise assessment of the 110 metre turbines, we felt that the proposed condition 26 wasn't precise, which is one of the considerations under the circular for that. In terms of condition 28 itself, we consider it unnecessary because the original consent issued by the reporter didn't seek the removal of these 5 turbines, and we consider it also unreasonable to use a condition to nullify an existing lawfully implemented development. The applicant has said that these turbines are located within an area of which they have control over. However, we're still of the view that the correct way to go about the removal would be an unopposed revocation. Thanks, David, for that one. So just kind of wrapping things up with this one. We do acknowledge that there is a level of local support for this one based on the letters and things that we received, and this was round about the community benefit. But we have taken this application as a whole, and the reasons for refusal, as set out in the report, make the concerns in relation to conditions 10 and the proposed conditions 26 and 28 clear. Given that it's recommended that condition 1 wouldn't be replicated in a new permission, the majority of the proposal is considered to be unacceptable, and to recommend this application positively as suggested by the applicant is akin to issuing part approval, part refusal, with the majority of the proposal being unacceptable in planning terms. So on that basis, we felt that all the in balance of all the matters in front of us, we felt that refusal is a better outcome just in the interests of correctness and relative to the substance of the application that they put in before us. That's all I have to say just now. I don't know if David wants to add anything more, just in terms of the conditions and what have you. I don't know.
Maybe we better hear what members have to say.
Yeah, okay.
That's you concluded, Chris? Yeah, thank you for that. Members, obviously a very complicated application, I say. Leader?
Can I just seek clarification what you're saying about condition 1? I mean, you're saying that that is superfluous. Does that mean to say that the completion date no longer applies?
Chris?
No, it's the time to implement the development. It's in the past we had you had 5 years to implement. It was changed to 3, but it's really just to make a start. It doesn't affect sort of the lifespan of the development. Normally, I should maybe have made a bit more clear. The time to implement the development is added as a directive. Now it's been firmed up in case law and practice now, so we don't add a condition stating when you can start the I think it's section 58 of the Act. Outlines the time that they have to implement it, so there's no need for that condition anymore. It's added as a informative.
So I'm still slightly confused. The fact that the permission they have gives a date by which it will start, that no longer applies, that date no longer applies, are we saying? Because the law's changed.
It's kind of complicated, isn't it? Because you wouldn't want to grant a permission and start building it 20 years later on. David?
I think trying to put it in as simple terms as possible, there is a requirement under the legislation which governs the time limit automatically now. And that's the difference. We don't attach a condition because it is there. What it is open to planning authorities to do is to clarify that by what's called, as Chris said, a directive, which is not a condition. So you don't have a condition on it, but it just says, it does actually say that you will have 5 years, but it's not an actual condition. One of the reasons for that is that it doesn't allow a Section 42 application in future to vary the time limit. And that was a way of clamping down on that. So when the 2006 Act came in 2009, that was a change. So you're supposed to have it as a directive instead of as a condition now, which is quite interesting that the reporter attached it as a condition when that was actually contrary to advice that had already come out by that time. But we are where we are.
Councillor Ferguson?
I think, if I pick you up right there, David, it's a time when the first shovel has to hit the ground. It was to stop land banking, am I right? Because people were getting permission and then those started for years, as you say, and then you get so many years to finish after that.
David?
To a degree, it was also trying to, I think, prevent the use or abuse of Section 42 applications to renew a planning permission on the cheap, effectively. So by having it in legislation and then having it just as a directive, it didn't allow you that opportunity to submit an application to vary that condition any longer.
Okay, members for the case officer Archie, and then Jeff.
Thanks very much, Chairman. I think I can remember this back in 2015, and we made a decision then that we would refuse this application. It went to appeal and it came back. Looking at all of the things within the report itself and the suggestions from the officer, I have to concur with a lot of what the officer actually says. Although we've learnt a lot about wind farms over that 3-year period, I think in this case it would be we have to be black and white in our decision making in planning, and I've got some concerns about some of the planning decisions that have been going on previous to this one. So as it stands here, I'm proposing that we go with the recommendations and refuse it.
Thanks for that, Jeff, and then John Martin.
Thanks, Chair. Just in terms of 449 and 450, it says that the targets changed in terms of the generation through renewable. So does it actually mean by 2030 we need to generate more energy by renewables than we are in 2020? If that's the case, does that not add weight to the reporter's reason for justification on economic terms?
Question, was it? Chris?
I did kind of allude to that in the report, and I'm not going to disagree that the government's energy policy is supportive of renewable, including onshore. The targets that they have are for all renewable sources and not just onshore wind, but planning policy sort of nationally is still clear that it's the right development in the right place. We're not shying away from that. but it doesn't follow that just because we're looking to, I suppose, we're looking for more renewable energy doesn't mean that it should be at the expense of, you know, environmental protection, or it doesn't necessarily follow that you would be looking for schemes that would otherwise have been refused planning permission in the past. I hope that kind of clears things up.
But the report clearly states that that would override the effect on the environment, if you like.
I mean, there is a scheme that can be implemented here. You know, they're just looking to change that. So there is a scheme of 100-meter turbines that can be implemented. It's just we're taking this in the round. It is very much on a balance of everything. I appreciate it's a very complicated application. Normally, when we see, and members might recall when we've had Section 42 applications in, it's normally to vary one condition, maybe two, sometimes to add another one in. This was for 7 conditions, so we've very much kind of had to take it as submitted.
Thanks, Jeff. I've got John Young and then Andy Ferguson.
Thank you very much, Chair. I mean, as Chris said, it is a very complicated application, and we do want to approve right developments in the right places, in particular wind farms. Because it's so complicated, can I take a rather simplistic view in it? In 2015, the planning committee of this council refused it. It went up to reporter and was approved. And the main reason for refusing it from this council seems to be the council's landscape architect was concerned about the visual impact from on a ferry. I mean, looking at the photographs, there's very few dwelling houses near this development, and it's come back. It's removed some of the smaller turbines and has increased the blade by 10 metres. I mean, when you consider the size of some turbines we've approved, 100 to 110 from at sea, I don't think anybody would notice a difference. And I just think it is the right development in the right place. It doesn't seem to impact on any local dwelling houses. It's actually quite unique. I've never seen in my short time on the planning a development where other community councils have been so supportive of it. So I just feel we should approve this particular development. Sorry, it's not a question, it's just a summation of my personal views.
Okay, it's not a proposal at this time. Andy Ferguson.
Right, okay. I kind of interrupted Chris in his presentation earlier, or I try to follow in the back of some clarification David gave Joe McKee. I'm going to ask the question again then, because I didn't find an answer to my question in Chris's thing, and to be fair to him, it's so complex, it makes it difficult reading. But we've got a wind farm, yeah. We've got a decision taken with the reporter. They're now asking us to vary, and the question was, can we allow any of the one variations to go ahead and not the others, or do we have to do the whole? And that is fundamental. I would hate us to take a decision that was flawed because we've not followed exactly what we're allowed to do.
I'll ask David to reply to that, Andy.
Chair, actually that is the key issue that we have been struggling with. You've hit the nail on the head. Very technically, I am satisfied that it is possible to look under Section 42 application at each individual condition and do an approve or refuse. Now that would work in cases, as Chris alluded to before, where you had one, maybe two conditions that were being looked at. You've got another application at the end of the agenda that is exactly that. Here, they've put 7 conditions into a basket, and it's the nearest comparison we could make was if you had an application for a house in the countryside that had no justification, and that house had a garage and a pond in the garden. You said, well, that house is unacceptable, we're refusing the house, but the garage and the pond's okay, you can go and build that. You have an entity here, you have had one single application with all these conditions in it. Condition 1, as Chris correctly said, really, if they'd mended the application to just be condition 1, which is the message we were receiving before the last meeting. And that is what the committee instructs us to go back and say, are you happy to amend the application description to be just that one? We'd have a different recommendation. We'd actually be recommending it be approved if it was just condition 1. The thing about shadow flicker isn't an issue, but because condition 1 can be dealt with as a directive, really you've got to look at the totality of this. This is a single application that's been consulted on. It's been advertised in public. You've got a very long description that's up there. That's the basis we've considered it, we've advertised it, we've consulted on it, and we've put forward a recommendation on that basis. I would be very uncomfortable to try and then pick apart all of that. What we always tell members is that you have to actually consider the application that's before you, not the one you might want to see. And certainly the advice, which I think I read out to members last time on Section 42 applications, is that if it is considered that planning permission should be granted subject to the same conditions as the previous permission, the Section 42 application should be refused. So we're looking at this as a large entity. If they were to resubmit an application on the basis of just condition 1 or just the shadow flicker issue, I don't think we would have a problem with that. But because the bulk of what they're looking at is unacceptable, we're looking at the application as a single entity. So short answer is no, I'm uncomfortable about an application of this description and magnitude of issues being picked off one by one, because at the very least we would have to issue a very different description. You couldn't have all those conditions in there that were considered to be unacceptable as part of that decision notice. So we would be amending what had been applied for.
Andy, do you want to come back?
Thanks. And I'm assuming here the whole process was, I mean, technically they could have put in 15 separate applications, that would have been 15 times fees and everything else. Maybe we would have hit our target for this year. Right, so I get the point. So if you lump them all together, the view is that we look at them all together. Is that a fair summing up of what you're saying, David?
That's pretty much what we concluded. Because of the scale of the description and what's proposed, it becomes very difficult to then pick things apart. Very technically, I think you probably could, and it may well be that if it is refused, goes to appeal, the reporter takes a different view. But our view was that this is an entity, and this is a very large description. To then start picking off bits, it turns it into a materially different proposal.
Thanks, Andy. So we've got a motion to go with the recommendation, Councillor Maitland.
I don't know whether the motion needs a seconder. I'm quite happy to second that motion if it's
Probably for practical purposes it will.
It's Councillor Dryborough's motion.
Lucy?
Yes, we do require a seconder for that motion, so I'll note that. Thank you.
In that case, though, it is a unanimous decision. Oh no, John Young. Microphone, please.
Thank you. I'll get it right yet. I see a lot of value in this development and very few negatives, so I would like to suggest an amendment that we accept this in its full.
Go ahead, but it might be complicated because I understand that we cannot require somebody to remove turbines who has a legitimate permissions for them to be there, so you'll have to be very maybe specific in your amendment. Is that right, David?
Yes, I probably should have mentioned that. That was the other thing that we also struggled with as officers, that we have looked into this further and we remain of the opinion that it is not competent or appropriate to actually try and extinguish valid planning permissions by way of condition. There would be two alternatives to the applicant. They could either seek an unopposed revocation or they could purchase the land and take the turbines down themselves, therefore negating that. But in legal terms, we are very uncomfortable with the idea of approving something which is a condition to kill off another planning permission that's already there and valid. So I would suggest that you, as far as that condition goes, you would be erring into dangerous territory about wanting to actually have that.
And you know, of course, and you're happy to put the amendment forward, you know what the applicant has already been said can come back, knowing what's been said here, or alternatively the applicant can appeal to the reporter. But John, you're going to put an amendment forward?
No, Chair, I'll remove my amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. In that case, if there are no amendments, can you confirm the decision of the committee, please, Lucy?
And I can confirm that in relation to item 5, the committee have decided to go with the recommendations as per the report, which is to refuse the application.
Thank you, Lucy. We come to agenda item number 6. Applications for A. Change of use of agricultural buildings to equestrian use. Change of use of agricultural land to form sand gallop. Installation of mechanical horse walker. Erection of stable block and erection of extension to existing building. Formation of access onto B722 and internal road layout retrospective, all of them retrospective. And B. Use of riding arena without compliance with condition 1 of planning permission 12/P/4/0172, which is a condition restricting use of riding arena to private use only to allow commercial use at Cherrybank, Albie Farm, Waterbeck, Lockerbie. The application types both A and B are full planning permission. The recommendation is to approve both A and B subject to conditions. The reference numbers are A 18/1203 full and B 18/1194 full, and the case officer is Iona. Iona, will you take us through your presentation again, please?
Thank you, Chair. The applications that are brought before you are submitted by the same applicant and pertain to pieces of land which are adjacent to each other and under his control. Under the scheme of delegation and in the interests of transparency, we have brought the applications before you because the agent is actually an elected member of Dumfries and Galloway Council. The applications are in part retrospect. They relate to an area of land which is associated with Cherrybank, which is a residential dwelling located within Waterbeck. To beyond its rear curtilage of Cherrybank, there is an area of land which has been primarily utilised until recently for agricultural purposes and benefits from various planning permissions for agricultural sheds and for a horse riding arena with a condition for private use. In these two location plans here, we have this here is Cherrybank itself, is where the applicant actually resides. This is where the riding arena currently is, which does have permission, I say, for private use. These here are agricultural sheds, which as a whole do have planning permission already granted. The first application, application A, relates to the formation of an upgraded access from the public road, the formation of a new access track down to the rear of the site, the formation of a sand gallop within this area here, and there is a new timber stable block being erected and a small void between existing sheds which has been covered up, and there's a proposal for a new horse walker. So the land that's encompassed within the blue line is land which is associated with Cherrybank and under the control of the applicant. And again here you can see this is where the riding arena is, this is where the new timber stable block is, these are the sheds which as a whole mainly benefit from permission, and we have the new access road. This is an image taken from Google Street View in 2009, just showing what the access was previously. There was a field gate there. The applicant has upgraded this access and formed a new track which just follows the perimeter down parallel to the road before following the existing field boundary down to the rear of the site. The Cherrybank, the residential dwelling, is just to the rear of the trees, as are all the agricultural buildings which you cannot see from this image. And the sand gallop is just beyond the brow of this hill here. So, that is the new upgraded access. A new sandstone wall has just been built, just going into the actual access, measures 1.3 metres in height. And this is the access track which goes down to the site. Council roads officers were consulted and had no objections subject to conditions in relation to the access. These are the agricultural buildings. This building here, 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 and here do benefit from planning permission. There is this area here, which there was a void previously, and you can see that a roof has been placed over it just to encompass the area into the existing shades. And this is the new timber stable block which has been erected. The riding arena is just to the right here, and the area that is proposed for a new mechanical horse walker is just beyond that car. To the left of this site, here you can see where the sand gallop has been formed. So again, this is just another image of the shed which has been built just to encompass the void. This was an agricultural building which previously was used for agricultural purposes and has now been converted to use for equestrian purposes. It has been fitted out internally with stabling. The other sheds remain to be used for storage for implements and fodder. This just sits immediately left of the external side of that shed, and this is where it's proposed to erect a mechanical horse walker. This is the sand gallop that has been developed. This in itself, it's just the topsoil has been stripped off and sand has been put in its place, and obviously the gallop rails have been erected. And that's just a view from coming down into the site of the actual gallop itself. So this is the timber stable block which has been erected immediately, again in between a void between the existing sheds and the arena which did have permission. And this is the arena itself, which is part of application B. Planning permission was previously granted for private use, and the applicant now seeks to use it on a commercial basis. Again, this is just a different view from the south looking north, and it shows the applicant's house, just the brick residential dwelling to the top right-hand side. The equestrian use itself is not incongruous for such a rural area, and the development proposed and that's been undertaken is viewed in context with the existing built form. It is therefore not considered that the development proposed and undertaken represents any material degree of conflict with the character of the existing land uses, and is therefore recommended approval subject to conditions for both applications. Thank you.
Thanks, Iwana. Members, questions for the case officer? Good lucky day, Iwana. Members were in session. Archie.
Thank you very much. I'm a bit concerned that this is a retrospective, part retrospective, and also the use of the riding arena from the last was a change in condition because it was supposed to be personal use the last time rather as community use or commercial use. But I do believe that this company, this industry that's here has been really spot on with the application this time. I have had some concerns from members of the community within the Waterbeck area on this, but I can see no planning reason why we can't refuse this any longer, so to go with the recommendation, Chair.
Everybody agreed? Okay, in that case, can you confirm the decision of the committee, please, Lucy?
In relation to item 6, members have agreed the recommendations as per the report, which is to approve A and B subject to conditions.
Chair, previously, well, at the last planning meeting, we drew the curtains while the presentation was going on and actually helped a little bit with the visibility of the slides on the left-hand side, and we don't seem to have done it this time. I just wondered if we could, because it does make it a little bit easier, particularly if somebody's using the laser pointer to see what they're pointing at.
My fault. I did say we'd do that every time in future, but we'll manage it for this one, Elaine. Agenda item number 7. Construction of a wind farm comprising 40 wind turbines generating capacity 20 megawatts, substation, access road, cableways and other ancillary works at variance with conditions 1 and 8 of planning permission 95/P/2/0227 to allow the wind farm to operate until the 31st of December 2027 without first being decommissioned, and to allow an extension to the size of the crane pads within the site at Windy Standard Wind Farm, Carsphairn Forest. Full application, reference number 18/1142/full. The recommendation is to approve subject to conditions, and the case officer is Chris McTeer. On that note, can we shut the curtain, please, just till we see the slides that are coming on? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. The application is before members today, as it's an application for major development under the hierarchy of development regulations, and again is made under section 42 of the Planning Act, which is for the determination of applications to develop land without compliance with conditions previously attached. And if approved, it would result in a new freestanding planning permission. The application itself is not for the erection of a new wind farm. It relates to one that is already in operation. It relates to Windy Standard 1. Here's the application site there, and there is the site layout. Now, members may or may not be aware that Windy Standard 1 was one of the region's first large-scale operational wind farms, and it has been in operation now in excess of 20 years or so, and it's located about 9 kilometres to the north of Carsphairn. The application in front of us today seeks to modify Condition 1 of the original 1995 planning permission and to introduce a new Condition 8. If I just run through the site photos. And these are photos that I took on site as opposed to indicative ones that we have from plans. So you can see the bulk of the turbines are spread out along a long ridge of land known as Galloway Rig. And there's a network of roads in between them. Okay, short and sweet, that one. The conditions that we're looking at, Condition 1, so that seeks to extend the operational lifespan of the wind farm, which currently runs to March 2021, and the applicant seeks to extend this to December 2027. Condition 8 is amended now. The original Condition 8 dealt with reinstatement of roads, tracks, track shoulders, generally the land round about the turbine bases. What we are looking at for this, certainly in terms of Condition 1, and I'm sure there'll be further discussion on the timescales for wind farms. It was granted a 25-year permission, which is essentially temporary, but albeit long-term, to the extent that it is tantamount to a de facto permanent permission. Nonetheless, in the spirit of the original application, it was meant to be time limited. So we're happy that Condition 1 still sets a definite end to operations on the site. In terms of Condition 8, notwithstanding the issue of Condition 1, the major components of these wind turbines could potentially need replaced in the future. When the wind farm was built out, the machinery required to gain access to it was much smaller than modern machinery, and blades, nacelles and things may still need to be changed on site. So the applicant seeks a kind of wide-ranging Condition 8 that would allow them to extend the crane pads round about the turbine bases to allow for larger cranes and larger machinery to come in. We haven't got rid of Condition 8 totally. It still requires reinstatement, so we've allowed these, or we're recommending these to go in parallel. In terms of the circular, Condition 1, we view that the change to Condition 1 is necessary in order to protect the spirit of the original decision, as is Condition 8. The Condition 8 also has a requirement. We've also included the idea of having a transport report to be submitted prior to any large machinery coming into site, just to to allow the roads department to comment on large-scale machinery coming into the site. And so, for the reasons outlined in the report, we recommend that this one is approved. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. I'll get Carla to open the curtains once we'll finish with questions for the case officer, just in case we need to refer back to some of the slides. Councillor McKee, oh, I've got quite a few. Councillor Maitland, Councillor McComb.
Why is the base not big enough that they are able to undertake essential maintenance work? They're talking here on decision 3, in the event the site operator requires to undertake essential maintenance to turbines, it can't be undertaken safely using existing on-site infrastructure. Why the devil are they not building the thing so that maintenance can be done?
Chris?
I suppose because the wind farm was built 20 years ago, the machinery was a lot smaller. These turbines are less than 60 metres high compared to the applications that we see before us now. So I think that just the availability of machinery, there are potentially no small cranes that they can use, so everything is much bigger, and it's really just to allow them into site. They do need to make these areas bigger to allow for modern machinery to come in and effect repairs as and when they need to.
Thanks, Chris. Councillor Maitland.
Is there any? I suppose I'm going along with Councillor McKee. My antennae are waving here as well. But there is the permission goes with the land, doesn't it? I mean, we're not doing anything which would then immediately permit a permitted development to let's say expand these things to 3 times the height, because that's where we're all going, everybody. In the case everybody can see, I can see it coming. So what's the implication? Because we wouldn't have a leg to stand on to say, no, we're not going to let you put a bigger base, because a bigger base. But what actually is the ongoing implication of this?
Well, I'll ask Chris to reply, but as far as I understand it, these would be considered as brownfield sites and would look sympathetically if they wanted to put new turbines 3 times the size on the same site. But that's not what's being asked for. Chris, can you respond to Councillor Maitland, please?
Yeah, the issue of repowering is one that members, I'm sure, are going to be grasping with in the coming years. In terms of this application, it's not the physical concrete bases that the turbines are based on. It's the land round about them that they need to make bigger for the machinery and things to come in. In essence, there's no change to the application as it stands just now. There are 40 wind turbines on site generating electricity, and there will still be 40 on site. So there's no change at the moment to the height. This is really just to extend the operational lifespan of it in terms of condition 1, and to allow more space round about the base if they need to.
Councillor McComb.
Thanks, Chair. Chris, I just want to check my understanding of what you've just said. You indicated that the wind farm company have de facto permission to operate in perpetuity. Is that the case?
Chris?
No. I think, I suppose in planning terms, it's almost sort of a permanent permission, although it was meant to be for 25 years. So I did allude to the fact that it is essentially temporary, but 25 years is a long time. We're not shying away from the fact that it is a time-barred development, and I suppose the applicant could have come in to remove that condition completely and just said, well, we'd like to operate this, from now till kingdom come. But they are looking for a few years extension to that. I imagine as well that, the turbines have been up for 20 odd years. they're going to have an operational lifespan, and I imagine they take the view that everything's working fine just now, and they're just looking to extend the lifespan of that a few years before they need to look at replacing the turbines en masse.
So it is the case that every 25 or 30 years, all they're required to do is replace the turbines, that the permission is already in place.
David?
I would say no to that, basically. What they're applying here is to extend the condition limiting the lifespan of the existing permission. But it's the same as anything. If you have a house and you demolish a house and take it right back down to ground level, you'd need a new permission to put it back up again. As Chris is also rightly saying, that there's going to be a whole debate over the next few years on repowering, which is a big issue. Repowering can be, at its most basic, what you're looking at here, extending lifespan of an existing wind farm. It can extend the size of blades as another option, but more commonly what we're seeing is whole new turbines coming in on site. They wouldn't be able to reuse the existing concrete pads because they're going to be too small for current size of turbines. But that's a battle for another day. That's not what we're being asked for. Chris, can you maybe take it back a slide? Because just as a point of interest, what as officers we all noticed, if you have a look at that turbine tower, you're beginning to see rust on it. These turbines do have a finite lifespan. So I'm quite relieved to see that they're not proposing another 25 years for those ones, because I think ultimately they're finite.
Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I've really got to watch what I'm saying here, because sometimes bigger isn't always better, especially with the two ladies either side of me. And I think, I mean, obviously, there's questions at the moment, but I would presume back in 1995 that construction design and management regs were in their early years, and obviously pads and cranes and things like that were a different size to what they are at the moment. I would also presume that any future build on that site would require an application, as David has just said, if there's going to be larger turbines. I think from my perspective, I understand that with the construction design management regs, the cranes at that particular time would have been much smaller. We've seen a massive increase in the size of both agricultural vehicles and cranes that require to do this type of maintenance. So that I'm not asking a question here, I'm just sort of giving a bit of an insight into CDM and things like that.
Good news, that. But I think the condition, if we agree today, is decommissioning in 2027 and everything off-site. Jane?
Yes, it was just a question of the consultation with SNH recommended pre-construction surveys are undertaken, and I don't think it actually appears as such in the conditions. So can I have some help on that, please?
Chris? Can you help officers? What page is what you're referring to, Jane?
Yes, it's on page, it's at the very top of page 82. And I think we could probably just lift it and add it as another condition. I think it'd be quite easy to do that.
Okay.
Chair, it's a fair point. I think I've missed that one as well. The difficulty I have with it, pre-commencement, it's there. It's been there for 20 years. I'm not sure how competent that would be to attach as a condition.
And
I think that's the problem, David, is that to make them bigger, you might take away the nesting areas of some birds that might have made their home under.
Making them bigger, you're talking about the base, you know?
The base, absolutely, yeah. And if to draw an analogy, you know, the pipeline in the North Sea, that fish congregate around the pipeline. That was the argument, not put a pipeline down there in the first place, you know.
So there might be a need to do something, David?
Yes, thanks. That was actually very helpful. On that basis, I think we probably should attach an additional condition to cover that. Apologies for having missed that.
Well spotted, Councillor Maitland. Hey, Chris, I've one minor question for you. You talk about a transport report being required. Previously, it was a traffic management plan. I presume we'll still try and, if there are big cranes and materials going in, we'll still manage them in the middle of the night rather than at the heaviest point of the traffic flow, etc. Is that what your report deals with?
In terms of the substance of the report, yeah, we would expect the applicant to engage with everybody. So that would include police, Transport Scotland, and the Council Roads Authority. And generally, that if that's the standard that they need, although the nighttime sort of deliveries is more for sort of the larger parts. But like I say, it's an issue for the consultees to get together. But in essence, yeah.
Yeah, because the very basis for making the bases larger is on the assumption that large components will be coming onto the site or the potential. Okay, have no other questions for Case Officer. Carla, can you open the curtains again, please? Members are now in session. Archie.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think with that additional condition on the survey, then we should go with the recommendations on it.
Members, agreed, thank you. One additional item, members, and I'll ask David if he can distribute a very brief report, and I'm happy to give you minutes to consider it. And the issue is that it's happened twice recently. The most recent one last month when we placed a condition on the tennis court at Moffat that the developer would have to sign up to a legal agreement for educational contribution. He doesn't want to do that. He doesn't want to delay. He's just given us the money, and we've not provided for that. So we've actually asked him to sign a legal agreement when in fact he's actually paid the money up front. Doesn't want it back. He just wants to be allowed permission to progress to the development stage. And I think this report seeks to just clarify that, and it will be introduced in future reports in a different manner that either it will be a payment up front or a legal agreement. So it's a good news story that the developer has paid it now, and he wants freedom to progress because we've placed a condition on the approval that requires that developer enters into a legal agreement. But I'll give you a few minutes, members, to study the report, and then we'll go in session. Lucy, you want to add something? David wants just a quick few words before we go to the recommendation.
Chair, it's basically just something that legal services have pointed out, that we've inadvertently snookered ourselves with this by normally there's a requirement for a legal agreement. In this two instances, they're wanting to proceed by just giving us the money. In fact, in one case, they have already given us the money, but legal services saying you can't actually issue the planning permission yet because you haven't entered into the legal agreement to require them to give you the money that they've already given you, which is nonsensical. But they're correct. There's a committee agreement here. So it's really just to have, we'll make sure this doesn't happen in future. We'll change the wording. But it's really just to have committee agreement that we can now release the planning permission in these two cases, notwithstanding the previous agreement.
So if members have all read the report, and we're all happy. Ivor?
Chair, happy to do that, but what is the process if we didn't spend it in the right place, as it says on the paper? Are we putting the money into a sort of bank account, and then when we spend it accordingly, it then comes out of there?
David?
This is a risk to the applicant, and that has been spelled out to them. A legal agreement gives them the protection on that. If you remember, we required developer contributions for education purposes for single houses until fairly recently, and there were, I think, 4 or 5 cases where that happened. They had entered into a legal agreement. We gave them the money back. It wasn't a problem. The one issue where people had said, we don't want to enter into an agreement, here's the money, we gave them an ex gratia payment on that. We gave them the money back, but technically we didn't need to. I would think that is what we're going to have to do here. We have a separate suspense account where the money is basically earmarked. It just sits there. It doesn't go into the big black hole of the council budget. So in that instance, if push came to shove, I would hope we would be able to honour it, but they don't have that legal protection. That is explained to them, and that is why our preference is normally to have a legal agreement.
So you've read the report, members, and you're happy with the recommendation. Is that unanimous? Thank you, members. Thank you for attendance today. If no further business.